Hey everybody, Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen leading the movement for movement and bringing you, yes you, and everybody behind you, if they are in fact, no under, no next to, prepositions. Bringing you another edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday Training, where I take a concept, a practice, something we use in autism fitness programming with our ASD and neurodivergent life skill athletes, whether individual sessions, groups, classes, whatever you're calling them, in a particular environment, and optimizing those skills both for yourself as a coach and for the athletes you're working with so that we can have better, more productive outcomes and build strength, stability, and motor planning that transcend the confines of whatever environment you're in and generalize to the outside world, because that is our goal, and that's an important thing to keep in mind in today's video. Now, of course, before I begin, please definitely subscribe so you never miss a video launch, and of course share this with people whom you think it might make a difference for. Ending a sentence with a preposition isn't actually the destruction of modern English. Anyway, so we're going to talk about, because it's timely, and I seldom do kind of timely stuff. If you've been following the channel for a while, following my stuff on Autism Fitness, you notice I don't do holiday stuff around the holidays. I don't do like the top 8 exercises for the holidays, because what does that even mean? It depends on what people are asking about. But in the case of kind of the back to school time, I like to focus, as might you be doing right now. That sentence did not end with the preposition. As might you be doing right now. Having some type of physical education curriculum. Now, the annoying factor here, and it's a little semantics, but I'll go into it, is many of you are likely running adapted PE programs. And several colleagues and myself sit around at times and lament the term adapted, because number one, the connotation is less than, and really if we're looking at physical education from the educational component or from the educational lens, all physical education should be adapted, because everybody is going to have different levels of physical skill, different level of motivation, and different coachability levels as well regarding their cognitive capabilities as they relate to those physical activities. So it's not against the adapted PE provider at all. You all are serving a phenomenally important purpose in the lives of your students. It's about the terminology, but it's also how, like, weightlifting should actually be called powerlifting, and powerlifting should actually be called weightlifting. Again, the English language. So when we talk about adapted PE, and mind you, my background, although I have taught some adapted PE classes in my career, did not start in the adapted PE realm. So when I came into working with the autism and neurodivergent population in a fitness capacity in, the early 2000s, yes, many adapted PE programs, if they even existed, were focused on sports. And the question is why? There are a couple reasons of this for this. I think number one, because it had definitely shifted in general physical education, where less concern or less focus on general movement patterns, developing general skills, and focusing on units of baseball, soccer, football, badminton, volleyball, whatever. And that's changed a little bit in certain areas. So when I speak with adapted PE coaches in one state or in one country, in one province, in one area, they may have a more progressive program that also introduces perhaps strength training, or also introduces some other modalities like yoga or dance or some of these other things. But I'd say as a main whole, and I'd love to hear your comments or read your comments below here about this, there's still an overemphasis on sports-based programming. And the issue or issues with that from the perspective of the neurodivergent population is, number one, I think that, or I know that we are missing out on developing a lot of fundamental movement skills that will generalize to activities of daily living, as opposed to sports specific skills where sports are not bad, but the movements in sports are very finite. They are exclusive to those particular activities. Whether we are talking about shooting a basket or throwing a ball, again, complex skills, it doesn't make them bad, it just makes them unconducive to showing up in other areas. Now, of course, if you're saying, well, if you're able to throw a ball in one environment, you're likely to be able to throw that ball in another environment. Sure, point taken. But if we're talking about what our hierarchy of importance is for each of our students or each of your students, wouldn't, and this is a leading question, but wouldn't we want them to develop first that general strength, stability, motor planning, and strength endurance that is, number one, much more likely to generalize to those skills of activities of daily living. Number two, going to, if done correctly with the appropriate coaching and cueing and behavior support, going to instill in them a positive relationship with exercise and physical activity. And three, and this is a big one, and this is where I get asked a lot of questions from those of you running group programs, and I'm happy to answer them. How do you make it scalable? In other words, if you have athletes who are, or students, we refer to our clientele in autism fitness programming as life skill athletes. If you have clientele or students who are in a wide range of physical capabilities, which is guaranteed, then how do you take each individual exercise, the squat, the press, the pull, the carry, and individualize it as much as it needs to be? Now, this is not talking about having a dozen different exercises for each and every athlete. It's about taking the same fundamental movement patterns and either modifying them, making them more accessible, or progressing them, making them more challenging for each student. Now, that seems, and I've seen this in the real world played out, this is going to be a lot more successful strategy than taking the game or the sport and attempting to modify that to each individual, because of a couple really important things. Important thing number one is that the speed and chaos of gameplay are automatically going to dictate that the most skilled and the most motivated individual is going to be the most frequent participant. So when that happens, we see this immediate slide of the scale and a big difference between the athlete who has very low motivation to participate and does not have that particular skill set, and the athlete who is highly motivated and has that particular skill set or is willing to continue trying to develop that particular skill set. Now, the same thing could be said for general fitness activities, again, coming back to predominantly strength-based activities, push, pull, squat, carry. I know I repeat these over and over, and there's great reason to do so. So if we're making the same argument for those, the level of scalability is so much higher for the general activities because it doesn't interfere with the speed of gameplay either, because there's a point at which the game or the sport breaks down so much that it's not even fundamentally being performed in any way that is going to lead to the individuals being able to develop the skill sets to participate in that competitive or quasi-competitive gameplay. So it begets the very simple but very important question: what are we actually trying to accomplish here? The other part, and this is something that I mentioned earlier, is, well, why mimic general PE, or why have sports-based units? A lot of it, unfortunately, is the idea of normalization. Like, if we get these students to participate in sports here, then they'll be able to do it outside and be able to socialize, which I'd say probably a good 98.5 to 99% of the time is not the case, because then we have to consider a couple things. Now, thing number one, that the training or education in that particular sport, that unit, for that given neurodivergent population over the course of 6 or 8 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever it is going to be sufficient to develop enough skills in that particular sport that the individual is going to be both motivated and individually capable to participate in that sport outside extracurricularly. All right? Potentially a big ask, maybe not, but oftentimes yes. And the second is that there's going to be some extracurricular or outside sport that is also conducive or able to support that particular individual. Again, these are not necessarily pipe dreams. It could be a reality, but it's less likely. And then, and even then, we're talking about a particular sport and choosing that over, which it really is a choice most of the time, choosing that over developing strength and stability and motor planning that will generalize, again, when done correctly, to the real world, and will also initiate that athlete into a positive relationship with fitness. Right? Clearly here I have a bias, and both can be done well. It doesn't mean choosing necessarily one over the other. So for example, if you are developing a sports-based curriculum, using some of these strength-based movements as the warm-up prior to the sports-based participation is great. The other issue sometimes is we have a neurodivergent individual who has an IEP and they are working into a general PE class. So sometimes for them, the skill set to participate with other neurotypical students is so high, and there are barriers not only physiologically, but from a cognitive perspective and following the speed of gameplay and following all the rules of the game. So having an alternative for that individual of, focusing on those general movement patterns and that general program can be an absolute lifesaver, because again, the scalability and their ability to participate parallel to what's going on as well. Ultimately, what I want anybody watching this to come away with is what is going to be truly meaningful and useful for any given class when we're talking about physical education or adapted physical education, until a better term can come up, because it's not really all that respectful of our neurodivergent population. Anyhow, until we come up with a better term for that, the adapted physical education component of it, how can we maximize the time for that student and the time for that group in developing skills that really matter, meaning those skills generalize to other areas of ability. And that's why we need to take a hard and considerate and skeptical or analytical look at fitness programs, sports programs, and where we can where we can match the two as well, where it makes sense. But it all comes back to how are we supporting our athletes physically with the exercises, how are we supporting them adaptively with motivation and focus, and then how are we supporting them cognitively with our communication, our coaching, our cueing. And of course, these are all things that you get when you become an Autism Fitness Certified Pro. If you're interested in the curriculum, you can go to the link somewhere, I think it's down to my left. This has been Autism Fitness Tuesday Training. I'm Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the movement for movement, which I hope you join soon. Thank you for watching, and that's my big top hat outro. That's it.